All right, so we are starting the award setup and award review for the Ascend training on day 2. I just want to make sure in terms of timing and process of everything. We have now gone through the full proposal process. We've gone through the JIT process and requirements at the just-in-time stage when NIH reaches out and says, we're going to fund your proposal. We need these updated documents. And now we are heading into the award stage. They funded your proposal, and we're going to talk about setup and all of those things related to receiving and processing your award for getting it ready for spending and management. So let me share screen here. Sorry, that wasn't where I wanted to go. Okay. It's saying my internet is wonky. Can you all see my screen on the Zoom, Kamaru? Wasn't sharing yet? Hold on one moment.
No, I'm not seeing your screen.
Okay, 1 second. To the Zoom. Share screen. Sure. The right place.
Okay, now I can see it.
You can see now. Okay. All right. Now you can see everybody's good. Okay. So this is the award setup and review presentation. I'm Malika Farley. Sam Amazara is here with me. She's one of the leads here at Emory for pre and post award support. And so I just want to go through a couple of key concepts. How do I get rid of it? Let me just, of course, I want to get rid of this and move it. Okay, want to go through some key concepts. The award setup begins at the time that the institution receives a notice of award, which is the official notice of the award from the sponsor. This phase transitions the project from the proposal stage to an active compliant sponsored award to the institution from the funding agency. Multiple central and department units collaborate to ensure that the award is set up properly, is issued accurately, and that is compliant before the expenditures begin. So here, I'll go through kind of the areas that are responsible just for making sure you have a set of eyes, a couple of sets of eyes on that award and its terms, conditions, all of those things. We have several areas that review it, and they have different responsibilities based on their area of what phase of the award setup they handle. And so you'll see here in the award setup process, upon receipt of the awards, the first area here at Emory that handles this is our Office of Sponsor Programs. They are the institutional office that submits the proposal actually to the sponsoring agency, and they're also the same office that handles the JIT and the receipt of the NOA once it gets funded from the sponsor. And so they review the sponsor's agency terms and the conditions of the award, making sure there's nothing that is there that is questionable around being able to provide the deliverable or meet the expectations. And then if there are, they'll work with the PI and the department or the RAS on those items. They negotiate the terms and conditions with the sponsoring agency. OSP ensures that the contract or the grant is compliant, and it includes the COI, which we talked about earlier yesterday, the conflict of interest that they've disclosed, the faculty member and any key personnel has disclosed conflict of interest, that IRB protocols and those things are in place, and that those things are compliant, any foreign compliance, so that if you're working with other countries and what is required in terms of those expectations, they work and go through all of that, and any other special conditions that they can be met by the institution before receiving that award. Well, we receive it, but we can go back and forth if there is question around expectation and meeting the expectations. They also serve as the institutional official signature and authority to execute the sponsored award, whether it's a grant, which in this case, we're not talking about non-industry, we're not talking about outside of NIH, but for us, we'd have several contracts and other types of awards. And then there's an area called post-award setup. They actually fall within research grants and contracts now, but they are their own team. They convert our proposal in our system to the award. And so there's the pieces that were entered at the proposal stage into EPICS. We talked about EPICS earlier this morning. They will take that data and then set up the award from the data that was entered on the proposal. And so in Compass right now, they complete that data entry and make sure it's ready for system interface. They generate and send the notification. What we have here is called an ENOA, which is our electronic system generated notice of award. That's the header of our page. It's on top of the actual award from the sponsoring agency. And so they will make sure that that documentation is also uploaded into a system that's called OnBase, and it's our repository for our documents here at Emory. And then once they do that, the award is then active. Research grants and contracts generally don't do a lot, except for PASS, that section of research grants and contracts. They don't do a lot at this stage of the award. But if there were financial milestones, which our PASS team takes care of that as well, any financial milestones, invoicing and payment related schedules, they set those up in Compass as well, so that you're already on schedule to bill, to invoice, to know, and then it's a responsibility of the RAS generally to notify the faculty member that he or she has a new milestone that's deliverable based due, but it is the PI's responsibility. Yes. And so they also analyze award documents for any deliverables. Again, they're not necessarily doing that separate from the PASS team. If they stand out, generally the PASS team catches all that and enters that into the system. But you'll hear later that RAS also, which is Sam and I, our team is like that additional set of eyes. So we go through, we review the terms, we review the federal rate, making sure the fringe, any types of rates, budgetary information, the effort commitments, and the project speed type or chart field, all of that is correct. We make sure if there's multiple projects that are needed at that time, we will make sure that that's added. And then we have to go back to the PASS team to get all those things corrected. We review the proposed budget versus the awarded budget. We review any cost share commitments and make sure that we set up any non-sponsor accounts related to those commitments. And then, if not, like I said, we go back and ask for the corrections. And then once everything is correct, our RAS unit sends it to the PI for their meeting, and Sam will go through a lot of that, plus the PI's research team and their roles in a few seconds. So we do still, as part of the award setup process, generally schedule a kickoff meeting. So we'll send an email to the PI and say, your award is here. Here's your speed type, your project period is this, your budget amount is that, and any special terms or deliverables that we note. You got a progress report due coming up next month, or you have to provide a technical report. We usually provide the information to the faculty meeting, usually in a kickoff meeting. We confirm the personnel, any effort on the award. And I won't go through all of this because we're going to have a review of a PI meeting that we'll all sit in on live tomorrow. But those are the types of questions that we ask in the meeting related to their upcoming expenditures, commitments, and any subawards or consulting agreements that we should plan for. Any questions yet on award setup? Again, I won't go into the meeting information because we're going to do all of that, and then Sam's going to go through more of what we review specifically and show the actual NOA and areas that we focus in on. PAN, I sort of mentioned to you all yesterday, is the provisional account number. Basically, if we haven't received the funding yet, but we know it's coming and the PI wants to go ahead and get their study on track and need to spend, we can set up a provisional account number, which allows them an account that they can start spending. And we request that from the PAS team. And so there's an actual action item that we request, and it usually does have restrictions. So if protocols for IRB or IRCOOK are still being reviewed, or there's a need for the faculty member to still fulfill some sort of compliance requirements, there will be a restriction for certain types of expenses. Even at the award stage, there could still be restrictions around those expenses if those things are still.
Let me ask for your plan. You have like to say, this is the proportion of or the amount of money that can be spent, because you know what they are doing is we are spending in advance. We are not, well, we are sure, but this can happen.
Yeah.
So
And
you have a policy to say, okay, this is the maximum amount we can spend on PAN.
we do not here at Emory, but I do recommend putting that in place. I think that's a great point, because here at Emory, we expect that funding is going to come. But in these new times that we're in, we don't know. And I do think that putting a cap on the spending is a good idea. We don't have that in place though yet.
I think we are pretty careful with when we request PANs. So like typically I would say, like, we request a PAN if we're a subcontractor in an award and we know the sub is coming. The prime has said, we have our award, we're working on your sub, it's coming, it's gonna be these dates, it's gonna be this dollar amount. Like, we have really definite information on what the PAN, like what the award is going to be. And then we're comfortable with assuming that risk. And it's just a matter of however long it takes them to send us the sub and us to sign it and then to sign it and get set up. So like, that's one instance. Another instance is like, we're not allowed to set up like a lot of awards if we don't have IRB approval in place yet. And we may have the award, but we don't have IRB approval. And so we'll request the PAN so that we can charge to the grant, which is active, while we wait for the IRB to be put into place. So we're pretty conservative when it comes to when we will use a PAN. So I don't think there's a lot of risk that the money's never going to come.
Conservative is good.
Especially right now.
Yeah, especially right now. And I do like the idea of putting a cap on those funds. What we do have as well is a process to review PANs. So if we have 5 that have been set up and one of them is now into the 6-month period and we don't have an award, it's time to really look at, do we want to continue spending on this pan and finding out what's the status of this award. Now, usually we get the awards within a month or two, usually within a month, we'll get an award if it's on a month or two at most. All right, you're up next, Sam. I'm sorry that this is in your way.
No, it's fine.
Let's see. At least, no, you just do. Thought you could scoot it. I think you can scoot it. Here, I can scoot it somewhere, but it's still,
might be.
yeah. Let's see. Okay. All right. So, at Emory, so when we get a notice of grant award from a sponsor, like Malika just outlined, OSP sends it along to our award setup team. They do their magic inside of our system, and they create an account for that award. And as part of that, they generate a document called an ENOA. And so that is our internal document that gives us all sorts of information about this funding stream. And so once we get the ENOA, that's when we have what we call a speed type, which is the account number that we need to be able to charge the grant. And the notice of award that comes from the sponsor is attached as part of the ENOA. So it'll have the Emory internal document first, and then the sponsor notice of award following. And so once we get that ENOA, we will review both what the award setup team has generated, because people make mistakes. And so we want to make sure that everything was set up correctly. And then we review the sponsor notice of award to make sure we understand all of the terms and conditions of accepting this award and all the things that we need to be mindful of as we are managing it, and bring to the attention of our PIs as needed. So some of the most salient things that we're looking for within a notice of award are the scientific or technical reporting timelines. When do we have progress reports due? Financial reporting timelines. When do we need to get financial reports out to the sponsor? Any budgeting restrictions with regard to, say, carryover? Is it restricted or allowed? Rebudgeting, what are the guidelines for rebudgeting? Things like that. Maybe we're not allowed to charge equipment. We need to know that. Invoicing and payment schedules, deliverables and milestones that may be due to the sponsor, and then any other restrictions that might exist on the award. So those are all really key things that we're looking for. So this is an example of an ENOA. So this is the Emory internal document that's generated. And so it's just a lot of information about the account that has been established. At the top here, it just has an award ID, which is an Emory internal number. It's actually linked to the proposal that we submit. I don't know if Tammy and Jamila talked about epics in the morning, but yeah, so that's the epics ID, then is converted over to the award ID at award. We've got the title and the sponsor, your award dates right here in the middle, your grant number. And then this down here is the project information. So this is the information that you need in order to actually spend on the grant. So this award has been set up with 2 different projects. And Emory does that. We have a general policy that if you have an investigator who works in another department and they're spending they meet a certain threshold, then they get their own sub project within the award so that their money can be tracked separately. We also might set up a separate project if we need to track funds outside of the main award. Say there's pilot projects that we're establishing, then we'll set up a separate project so that we can track those pilots separately. And so these are 2 separate projects that have been set up. This is the key number right here, our speed types. That's what they need to know, our PIs need to know to be able to purchase things on there. We need that for getting effort allocated to the awards and things of that nature. And then there's information about the dates of the award, Emory has two different fringe rates, one for federal awards and one for non-federal awards. And so it's really important that the project is set up correctly, either fed or no fed, so that the fringe charges appropriately. So that's one key piece we always double check. The F&A rate and your base is always very important. Make sure we got that right. And then the budget as awarded by the sponsor. And then there's also information about who was named as key on the proposal. So this is also pulled from EPICS. So all of the people who are listed on the EPICS record are going to be listed here and their effort levels as was proposed. So it's not always the most accurate information because effort levels change, but that's what was proposed. And then information about any IRB or IOCOOC approvals that are relevant to the study, and then any subcontracts that are included on the submission. And then the other piece is just at the bottom. There's comments that our OSP analyst, when they send the notice of award over to award setup, they might include some comments for award setup to keep in mind as they're setting things up, and to draw our attention to them as well. And then this is just an additional sheet that has more detail on the projects and speed types that were set up on the award. And this one was a year 2 award. And so this is showing overall, it's including both year 1 and year 2. So your total funding so far through the current period. So that's the Emory ENOA piece, which is more just informative, but will obviously be very different for your institution. But this is, I will walk through an NIH notice of award, and this is sort of relevant to everyone. These all generally look the same. So on the left here in this nice blue box, at the top, it's just information about the recipient, so about Emory. It'll have the PI's name, authorized official, so just some relevant information about us. And then at the bottom, it will have your GMS and your PO at NIH. And so that's always really important to know. The one thing I will say with that is that the GMS and the PO change from time to time. And so this is sort of a snapshot of a moment in time. And since then, maybe your GMS changed. And so usually if I do want to reach out to a GMS or a PO or ask, OSP to reach out to them on my behalf, I'm going to go back into ERA Commons and look at it directly in Commons to see who the current GMS and PO are, because this might be outdated information. And then we have some information about the award itself, your award number, your project title. This stuff in the middle, like your statutory authority, your assistance listing number, those I don't really care as much about. It's not really anything that matters too much to my management of an award. This could be informative. Number 17, the award action type. So this is a non-competing continuation. So that's, as a result of the submission of an RPPR. And then, so this box right here is where we get into the budget information. So the first part above this blue line here is specific to this budget period. So it gives you your dates for this budget period right here. So this is June 2021 to May 2022. And then it gives you your direct, indirect, and total cost amount awarded. And then in this case, they also are giving us $3,834 in approved carryover to spend in this year. So your total budget is $510,636. But the new funds are this 506, and then we've got this carryover that's offsetting some of that. Then this section below this blue line here is for your full award to date. So this is telling you your total award period. So this grant is running all the way from September 2020 to May 2024. So that's your full period. This dollar amount here in number 27 is what has been awarded through this and notice of award. So it's not all years, it's all years up to now, right? So if this is year, I guess 2, it's year 2. So this is the total of what was awarded in years 1 and 2. Yeah. So this, I'm going to come back to this in a minute because it's helpful when you're doing your other support. You can
So
use
what you're saying,
this.
This not divided for the other support.
No, because you have to add, you have to do some math. So I'll show you in a minute. I'll come back to it. So that's everything on this page. I'm sorry, and I haven't stopped. Are there any questions?
No.
Okay. Um, so, okay, next page is some nice standard boilerplate language. At the top, you will have your PIs, so your contact PI and any MPIs are on the award, and that's pretty critical information. You need to know who your PIs are because they have some requirements, which I'll go into in a minute. And then it tells you what they're doing. So they're awarding a grant in the amount of $506,802. And then the rest of it is just sort of boilerplate language about, you know, expectations, where else you should read, about rules and regulations and things like that. So, pretty standard on every single notice of award. On the next page, okay, so this is where it goes into a little bit more depth on your budget. So it gives you a breakdown of, you know, your award by cost category, your total directs, indirects, total costs, and then it's again showing that offset and carryover. So what are they actually awarding you right now? The 506, and then you have that $3,834 in carryover. So that's what's awarded now. And then this table again will show what's being awarded in the current year, so 506. And then it's going to show you what you can expect in the next year. And so what I usually do when I'm trying to calculate my number, my dollar amount for another support page, is I take this number and I add any future years. So the 506 is already part of that number, but I would just add the 492 to that 2.7 million. And then that's the number I'm going to put on my other support page. And NIH will often cut budgets. So, you know, they say right now, I'm going to give you 492 next year, but then they might come back and give you 470 or whatever the case may be. And so that number does need to be updated consistently. Just as each time you get a notice of award, check it again to see if anything needs to be updated. Yeah, so that's that piece. And then here, mhm.
Can I just add?
Yes.
You can internally also break down your budget in addition to this, so like add additional budget lines, cost categories, depending on what you want to see and track internally, but these are just the general cost categories that NIH uses. But just depending on how your internal system is set up, you could have additional breakdowns of cost categories.
Yeah, and usually I would say once we get a notice of award, one of the things that we're doing is we're taking the original proposed budget for that period and we're updating it. So we're updating it for new base salaries if the fringe rate has changed. And then we're either reducing it or increasing it to meet what the sponsor has actually given us. And so that might be part of the kickoff meeting, is reviewing that updated budget to talk with the PI about what has changed. Do you still need all these things? You know, if there was a TBD person on there, have you identified the person for that role? Things like that. So we have like a living document that's more accurate, because what you propose is great, but things change. And so it's good to have a more up-to-date idea of, you know, what we can actually expect in the upcoming year. So, and then this section right here is some relevant information for drawdown. So the document number is what you're going to need to draw down the funds from the PMS, payment management system, which is outside of our purview. So I don't know exactly how it works, but I know that that is an important piece of information. And then, okay, so then the next section, again, is some pretty standard boilerplate terms and conditions. But the one key thing I want to draw your attention to is that it will always have this section right here. It will tell you how they handle carryover, and it will tell you about SNAP. So first carryover. So, a lot of NIH awards have automatic carryover, and if they do, it will say that explicitly here. Some NIH awards do not, and it will say carryover into the next budget period requires grant management officer prior approval. So that's a really critical piece of information. If you do not have automatic carryover, then you need to be mindful that you'll be submitting a financial report each year to the NIH, and whatever you submit to the sponsor, anything that was unspent becomes restricted, and you have to get approval to use it in a future year. So you'll have to submit a carryover request to the sponsor in a future year and get explicit approval via another notice of award to use that carryover in that year. And then one thing that I feel like I need to always tell my PIs is if you get carryover approval and then you don't spend the carryover in the year it was awarded in, it gets restricted again, and then you'll have to request it again. So
And then also talking about the expired funds.
oh,
I
yes.
don't know why this is, our screen is saying that it's gonna cut off, so I was trying to hit like buttons here, but I hope it doesn't cut off. If it does, we can turn it back.
Okay. One thing that we've recently learned, I mean, I think maybe we knew, but didn't see it in practice, is that the NIH funds expire after 5 fiscal years. So if you have an award where you were given funds 5 years ago, and then let's say, so it was awarded in September of 2021, and then we roll around into October of 2026, which is when NIH's new fiscal year starts. Those funds from 2021 expire, they're gone. And so it's rare because NIH grants don't typically go longer than 5 years, or by the time you hit 5 years, you've already spent the money from the first year, so it's okay. But we did have a case where the award it had been going, it was in a no-cost extension, and it was a longer term grant, and we did lose a significant chunk of money because the funds expired. So that's just something to be mindful of, is what fiscal year were my grants awarded in, and are we coming up on 5 years, because we do want to make sure those funds get spent before they expire.
And in part of that scenario, COVID was a factor.
Okay.
Because we had activities that couldn't occur, right? And I think that the PI justified those in the carryover request, but it didn't matter to NIH after it got to the 6th year. They were like, you didn't spend them, and so, and unfortunately, we learned a huge lesson.
We did, yes, yes. Yeah, and then the other thing that you'll see here is the SNAP determination. So SNAP is streamlined non-competing award procedures. So it's just it's a determination to indicate how you're going to submit the RPPR, basically, and if carryover is restricted or not. So SNAP, things that are part of SNAP have automatic carryover, and things that do not, that are not part of SNAP, do not have automatic carryover. The other main difference,
Repeat what you just said.
yes, awards that are SNAP have automatic carryover.
Okay.
Awards that are not SNAP do not have automatic carryover. Yeah.
We'll go through the carryover request, I believe Friday, of what we need to do in those scenarios when we have to request carryover. But yes, this is just to identify what type of award.
Yep. The other significant difference between SNAP and non-SNAP, so SNAP awards do not require annual financial reporting, but non-SNAP ones do. So you'll have to do an annual financial report if it's not SNAP. And then the progress reports will be due at different times. So if it's a SNAP award, it's due on the 15th of the prior month. So if your grant year ends on June 30th, your progress report is due on May 15th. And as part of your progress report, you do not need to include a budget. If it's not SNAP, it's due on the 1st of the month prior to the end of your budget period. So if it ends on June 30th, your progress report is due on May 1st. And you do have to submit a detailed budget and justification as part of the progress report. So those are the key differences for SNAP versus non-SNAP. But that's, I mean, that's the most relevant thing in this section that I look for. There's other terms and conditions there. But that's what's most important to me when I'm looking at that section. And then section 4 is the most important section, I would say. This is where it has your grant specific restrictions and other requirements and things of that nature. So this one, I'll just quickly walk through. It's telling you it's not a clinical trial. It says that there's going to be pilot projects as part of this center grant, but that you need prior approval for the pilot before it initiates. So that one's really critical, because if this were overlooked and you did not get that prior approval and they started spending, those costs could potentially be disallowed. And who's going to pay for them? I don't know. So it's really important that you're getting that prior approval. Some NIH notices of award will indicate key personnel. So it will name key personnel. So the MPIs, any PI and MPI is automatically a named key personnel, but they might also include additional people. So you include on your submission all sorts of key personnel, but the NIH might think like, oh, this person is like super important. We want to call them out in the notice of award. And so those people who are on the proposal but not called out in the award, they can do things like reduce their effort by whatever amount, and it's not a big deal. But if they're named, then there are special restrictions placed on them. If they leave the grant, if they're away from the grant for 3 or more months, you need prior approval. If they leave entirely, you need prior approval. If they reduce their effort substantially, which means by 25% or more, then you need prior approval. So if they were budgeted at 20 and they have to stay above 15%, they can't be 15%. They have to be more than 15%. So you just want to make sure you are aware of who your named key personnel are. If there's no one listed in section 4, then it's just your PIs. But if there are people here in section 4, then you want to be watching those people as well. Then it talks about, that there are pilot projects budgeted and those funds are restricted. So you can't use that money for anything else. So you want to just be mindful if there are any restrictions in relation to that. And then it's requiring that we submit an interim progress report by November 1st. So there can be all sorts of things in here that you just want to be aware of. One important one that isn't here, but that I always want to keep an eye out for, is that there might be a human subjects restriction. So NIH will sometimes issue a notice of award before the IRB approval is in place. But they will include a restriction on the award that says, we're funding this without IRB approval. You need to send us your IRB before you start your human subjects research. And then we'll give you a new notice of award, removing that restriction. And so again, you want to make sure that as soon as you have that IRB approval, you're sending it to the NIH and you're getting that removal of the restriction, or else you might get into a situation where the NIH comes and says, hey, you never sent us your IRB. Did you start the study? And then those costs could be disallowed because the restriction wasn't removed. So it's really critical that you're paying attention to what's in this section and you're following up on anything that requires your attention to get any restrictions removed. And then the last piece of it is just another budget table. And this is going to show you the breakdown by cost category for both the current year and any future years. And then your calculations for your F&A, right? So it might not be readily apparent from this table how they got 183,305 as your F&A. And so this will show you what your base is, what your rate is, and how they got the 183. So those are all the pieces of reviewing an NIH notice of award that I find to be the most important as I'm going through. Do you have any questions? Malika, did I leave anything out? Okay.
Thank you.
Sure.
Many of your NIH notice of awards won't have all of that many of them, but,
But you know, it's pretty similar, even apart from NIT, even CDC follow this format. Though the content may vary, but.
yeah.
ours-
Yeah.
it
And
tells
the
each
need
other-
to review all of the things
Yeah.
like and remain the same regardless
Yeah.
of sponsor.
Mhm.
Mhm. Kamara, any questions online? We're zooming through.
No, actually, because the presentation, as Dr. Banjo rightly said, is similar to what we see in the CDC NOA. Yeah, thank you. No question.
Anything you would suggest we add? Or anything you're looking for that we might not have covered?
Virtually, when it comes to the NOA, I think virtually everything has been covered. I can't remember because the NOA they are always similar. We've covered the terms and condition, restriction, redirection, and carry over, and the rest. I think virtually covered most of the areas. I can't remember anything that was not covered. And one thing I've gained from this, I've been seeing it, but I did not really look at it the way it was presented. It's this snap and non-snap of a thing. I think it's an eye opener in that perspective. Thank you.
Welcome. Okay, let's stop the recording.
Thank you so much.